HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Boy with the Perpetual Nervousness, a Memoir, by Graham Caveney. Read by Jonathan Cowley. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. When my pen leaks, I think awry. And who will give me back the good ink of my school days? Gaston Bachelard, The Poetics of Reverie. She says things like neural pathways and emotional processing, and some success with veterans from the Vietnam War. She says things get frozen, shelved, not properly digested. There is a bagatelle behind my eyeballs. She says, "Follow my finger." I follow her finger. It is pulling back the spring on the pinball machine in my frontal lobe. Recall the scenes, she says. Recall them as though they're on a video loop. Got that? Video. You can control what happens. You can pause or fast forward or rewind. It's a black and white movie, loosely autobiographical, based on actual events, as the blurbs always put it. I am playing me, typecasting you might say. I am 15 and I have bad skin. I have bad skin and I have long hair. My hero at the time was Jim Morrison from The Doors, and I reckoned that on a dark night in a fog at 50 paces, I might be able to pass for him. This was 1980. Punk had already happened, but not in that ground zero road to Damascus way that is so often attributed to the arrival of the Clash's, the Pistols, the Damned's first album. Not for intense and bookish young boys from Accrington, anyway. For us, for me, punk was still partly a rumour, even after its demise. We caught it as it was leaving the building. The memory of the Sex Pistols' Manchester Free Trade Hall gig was mythic, not singular. It was like the Kennedy assassination or the moon landings, both ancient and crushingly modern. One day, technology will enable us to prove conclusively just who did attend this event, and that day will be a day of terrible reckoning. Names will be broadcast on loudspeakers throughout the city, and grown men will weep. Where was I? That's right, following her finger. Her, by the way, is Julie, my therapist. It is 2012, and I'm having post-rehab therapy for the issues that led to my addictions. There used to be scare quotes around both these words, issues and addictions, but not anymore. Now they just trip off the tongue with all the sincerity we can muster. She carries on with the finger stuff, the one next to her thumb, right hand fully extended. As it moves back and forth, she's asking me to remember details. The more detailed the details, the better. The name for this treatment is EMDR, Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing Therapy. The idea, and there is an impressive amount of evidence to back this up, is that traumatic and distressing events are not processed properly at the point of trauma. It is, if you like, precisely what is traumatic about them. The events thus become buried, only to surface later as neurosis, pathology, disorder. It has an almost tactile specificity to it, this EMDR stuff, as though my brain is Play-Doh and needs to be remolded. It's also had some remarkable success, particularly in the States, and that always makes me suspicious. I may have PTSD. It's my most recent diagnosis. It would make sense from what I've read. I am, as they say, textbook. And if you have PTSD, then you need EMDR. Treat one acronym with another. What we're doing is time travel. My mind is a TARDIS, and somehow my experiences can be unlocked and reprocessed through this side-to-side eye movement recall. And it is true that something is shifting. I'm remembering one specific incident within an incident, the feel of bristles on my face. The movie starts to seep into colour. There is a dissolve, a rearrangement of dimensions and perspective. That bit looks sharper, the angle on the bed. There is a softer focus on the lens. Something about it strikes me as ludicrous. It reminds me briefly of a Carry-On film, one of the bawdy British movies of the 60s and 70s. I start to laugh. Julie smiles at my laughter, encouraging me. This is your film now. You can make it into a comedy if you like. It's yours to view however you want. I am laughing hard now, a contained hysteria that I can feel at the back of my throat. This is absurd. There is a man. Look at him. He has hair on his back. He's grunting. There's a boy. Underneath him. The mise-en-scène is off. The set is made of cardboard. Julie is staying with me, calm, alert. I'm changing my tenses. It was becomes it is. I switch pronouns, I to he to it. Projections onto the back of my closed eyelids, faster and slower at the same time. It's like old newsreel clips, pâté, home movies. Clips of people from the silent era walking and waving in that disjointed, flickering motion. For some reason, I associate old celluloid footage with baseball, Babe Ruth, although I am not an American and have never seen baseball. The images slow down. There's an overdub with the kind of hallucinatory soundtrack that gets used in 60s acid indie films, the kind with Peter Fonda, maybe directed by Monty Hellman. And action! His hand is on my cock. His cock is on my stomach. His mouth is on my mouth. He is masturbating. There's a boy who looks like me. He's lying on his back. I'm looking down at him from the ceiling. And cut. Disassociation is one of those terms that has entered our collective wisdom in ways that I am both thankful for and irritated by. Thankful in that it gives legitimacy to the experience of sexual trauma. Irritated that the experience can be reduced to a one-word tick box. The ambivalence about being diagnosed speaks to the condition itself. Who doesn't want their experience to have a description? Yet who doesn't want to be more than their diagnosis? Disassociated it is then, for the moment, and amongst other things. It is certainly my experience that when reality is overwhelming, unprocessable, non-computable, our minds simply take us somewhere else. We replace unacceptable truths with fantasies, fantasies which may have a truth of their own, yet which place us at odds with the cold, unforgiving empiricism of the world as it is. Thanks to genre fiction, Hollywood, and popular psychology, we now expect the mad and the dangerous to have rationales of their own. The fucked-up kid is our new femme fatale. The kid locked in a stranger's basement. The kid who witnesses his mother's murder. The kid forced to participate in genocide. We love our fucked-up kids nearly as much as we despise the adults they become. What we know is that trauma is never something that is simply left behind, like blood at the scene of a car crash. Rather, it is something that the survivor, the sufferer, carries within them. The wreckage that is part of their self. The first time that I heard the term disassociation was in relation to chemistry, whereby it describes the process of ionic compounds being broken down into smaller particles and ions. I remember sitting in chemistry labs as a kid, watching obscure-sounding acids or salts being dissolved in water, and watching this kaleidoscopic process of crystallization as each constituent part, retreated, was liberated, got banished from all the others. I remember asking the teacher, a disappointed man named Mr. Stokes, if these disassociated parts could be reunited or reintegrated. He assured me that, with a few exceptions, they could. Of course, this idea of a traumatized childhood carries with it the implication that there could be such a thing as a non-traumatized childhood. Readers of Freud will know that, for him, childhood was itself a kind of trauma, a time when the infant has to relinquish his tyranny over his parents and be coerced into the dreaded disillusion of the reality principle. According to this model, illusion of the reality principle. According to this model, no one emerges unscathed. We become who we are by abandoning our most primal desires, being born again into the laws of our Father, societal norms, non-incestuous desire, relationships with bodies other than our own. The traumatized child, then, is nothing more than a tautology, a description of an inevitable process of disenchantment. To which I want to add, if growing up is traumatic enough in itself, then getting fucked as well kind of adds injury to insult. I didn't get a free pass on all the other horrors of adolescence on the basis that I was busy dealing with the specific horror of an unwanted cock. It seems to me now profoundly unfair that I still had to contend with wet dreams as well as abuse, romantic rejection and sexual assault. Abused children often talk about having their childhood stolen from them, and for good reason. What is harder to describe is the feeling of having been robbed of a childhood that you didn't have. The childhood you imagined you might have had it not been for the being fuck stuff. Put another way, the question becomes something like, if I was being abused during a period of my life that I know to be experienced by people who weren't abused as still volatile, traumatic, and confusing, then to what extent are those feelings specific to my abuse? How could I ever know? Only a non-abused me would be able to solve this fucking riddle, and a non-abused me would not be me. Answers, please, on a postcard. Next. When a person from Accrington, PFA, meets a person not from Accrington, PNFA, there will at some point be the following exchange. PNFA. So, where are you from? PFA. Either sheepishly or defiantly, embarrassed or proud. Accrington. PNFA. Oh. Delighted by their perspicacity. Stanley. Accrington Stanley FC was indeed the only claim to fame that my hometown had when I lived there. Years later, we would be able to add Jeanette Winterson and the actress Julie Esmondhalgh to our roll call of Accrington's great and good. But in the 70s and early 80s, the folk memory of a founding First Division football team was as close to recognisable as Accrington got. When I first left home and went to university, I probably had a dozen such exchanges within the first day. Such was my annoyance that I tried to fudge it with a vague Lancashire way, which only served to make me seem either evasive and furtive, as though I was on the run from the police, or dim and uncertain, like I'd just had a course of ECT. I tried amending my answer to Manchester for a while, mainly on the basis I had a northern accent and a record collection that contained the Buzzcocks, Joy Division, and magazine. This would work until I actually met someone from Manchester, or anyone who had been to Manchester, or anyone who knew anything at all about Manchester. Within minutes, I would be forced into mumbling something about a town near to, cotton mills, close to Blackburn. Eventually, I would blurt out, Accrington. They would say, Stanley, and another little bit of me would die. Quite why I took so vehemently against my hometown's football club, I don't quite know. It's partly the name. Could we not have been a robust United or a stoical Town? Stanley made us sound as though the team consisted of one man, or worse, 11 men all with the same name. It added to my sense that I wasn't from a place so much as a punchline to some unimaginative southern scriptwriter's joke. Note. Not just southerners, actually. There was a time when Coronation Street used Accrington as shorthand for a certain kind of existential dread. A face like a wet Wednesday in Accrington was one I remember. Where you from? Accrington? Sorry to hear it. I did try on the football thing as a kid for a while. I decided that if supporting a football team was compulsory, and it felt as though it was, I would at least give it a perverse twist and support Burnley Football Club. My dad dutifully took me to Turf Moor, Burnley's stadium. I still remember the chant, Leighton James, Alan West, Martin Dobson, and the rest. Na 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 na, sung by the Longside Burnley's football club supporters end with boozy exhilaration. I remember getting a hot pie and bovril at half-time and scalding fat oozing out of the crust onto my paws. I remember thinking, as we stood behind the goal, how unfair it was that we had paid full price but only really got to see half a game, and wouldn't it be better if they used one end of the pitch rather than both? I remember the fence being charged, the one that separated the away fans from the home fans, and a chant going through the ground, AGRO, AGRO, hello, to the sound of Gary Glitter's Hello, hello, I'm back again. I remember feeling sick and grabbing hold of my dad's hand and him telling me not to worry. I remember the chants getting louder. You're gonna get your fucking head kicked in. You're going home in a fucking ambulance. And sharpened coins and empty crisp bags filled with piss and crushed beer cans and darts all being thrown from one side of the railings to the next. Ah, the beautiful game. Next. Her legs, pumping up and down the cold street, had the regularity and power of pistons. Pat Barker, Union Street. I was born in Roughly Hospital on November 26, 1964. It's just a few miles from Pendle Hill, a place famous for its witches, one of whom, Alice Nutter, has been memorialised with a statue near the hospital. I am looking at my birth certificate now. It's my mother's writing, no doubt about it. Name and surname of father, John Caveney. That's how my mum has written it, lower than uppercase. No middle name like me. The family joke that we couldn't afford one. Under occupation of father, maker, lorry driver. Maker? I suspect that my mum meant labourer, but she is clearly emphasising that there is a skilled element to her husband's labour. I don't remember him being a lorry driver. For most of my life, he was the groundsman at the local comprehensive, the UK equivalent of a US public high school. A job that suited him fine. Solitary, outdoors, practical. Signature, description, and residence of informant. K. Caveney, Mather, 47 Cedar Street, Accrington. The K was for Kathleen, her maiden name Smethurst. The youngest of 3 daughters, she had gone with her 2 sisters, Mary and Margaret, into the mills when she was 14. The girls had lost their mum to breast cancer when they, and she, were still young, and so it had fallen to them to cook and clean and generally keep house. Her dad remarried, a textbook evil stepmother according to my mum, although the resentment would always be tempered with a, but it was good of her to take us all on. One of her favourite could-have-been stories was that there was an older cousin who wanted to adopt her when her mum died, and who had made a few quid. Where? How? And would have sent her to secretary school. You could hear the capital letters when she told this tale, but that her dad had wanted to keep the girls together. Just quite what this story was based on, I could never find out, but it clearly troubled my mother, this sense of having been sold short. Next. Though I have asked many of my acquaintances at what stage in their childhood or adolescence they became class-conscious, none has ever given me a satisfactory answer. Robert Graves, goodbye to all that. If you turn to any sociologist's dictionary and look up the term respectable working class, RWC, you will find a picture of John and Kathleen Caveney. I'm told that we don't have a working class anymore, let alone a respectable one. Aspiration and ambition have embourgeoised us all, apparently, although I'd like to see Westminster's finest sell that on the streets of Accrington. Yet RWC is what my parents were, unproblematically, mostly, unashamedly, on the whole, non-class consciously, virtually. It was my dad's boast that he wasn't frightened of hard work. For my mum, Her house was spotless, and she kept a good table. Just what constituted a good table we will find out later, but looking back now I'm struck by the glaringly obvious, but never discussed, gender divide. My mum's work in the mills was never really discussed as work. I remember going to visit her factory once and being rooted to the spot by the sheer noise of the machines. It is to my shame that I can't tell you the difference between the weaving and the spinning, the shunting and the braiding. All I can tell you is that the place was stifling hot, deafeningly loud, with huge machines that needed to be manually operated by a workforce that was mostly female. They were communicating with a mixture of sign language and lip reading, the machines having drowned out any hopes for speech. Here was hard graft, as us Brits used to call manual labour. The women's hands were getting dirty. Their bodies were clearly sweating. Yet it was to my dad's world that such language belonged. My mother simply went out to work. And came home to work. It fell to her phrase, to do the washing, the shopping, the cleaning, the cooking, and those countless other jobs that were never called jobs. Even the verb fell is shot through with a sense of the accidental, the clumsy, the easily overlooked. Women used to fall pregnant. Which brings us to the good table my mum so proudly kept. The phrase meant that the meals were regular and homemade. A bacon sandwich or ready-brek, instant oatmeal for breakfast. Central heating for kids. A packed lunch, meat or fish paste for all three of us. And a hot meal at night, never later than 6. A good table meant that we never went hungry, rarely went to the fish and chip shop, the chippy, and always had afters, dessert, after our tea. It meant that we ate around the kitchen table. Setting the table was my one and only domestic task, carried out with martyred stoicism, and that the TV was turned off whilst we ate. In the middle of the table is a plate of bread and butter, a salt and pepper pot, white pepper, black pepper wouldn't hit the north for at least another decade, a bottle of Heinz tomato ketchup, a bottle of Daddy's brown sauce, and a jar of pickled onions. The meal in front of me, this being a Tuesday, is potato pie and peas. The ingredients are potatoes, corned beef, a carrot, and an onion. On top of this lies a suet crust. The crust is slightly burnt brown on top and a chewy wallpaper paste white beneath. The peas are mushy, a luminous green that may have been the result of Mum soaking them overnight. It is a concoction that demands the sharp vinegary twist of Daddy's brown sauce. It glugs from the bottle, smothering the dense grey blandness of the stew. It is almost pure carbohydrate, a rich, glutinous expanse of a meal designed to weigh you down and keep you close. No little light supper this. This is food that can still remember the workhouse, food that is designed with insulation in mind. Mum takes away the plates, scrapes the remains back into the deep white pan. This will keep, will be fried up later, crust and all. I prefer it this way. For dessert, a can of Heinz strawberry jam sponge pudding, steamed and served up with a trough of bird's custard. Our occasional meals out were obstacle courses in anxiety. My parents would fret about coordinating their appetites, having to reset their internal rhythms to the idea of food at 7:30, even 8 o'clock. What were they meant to do between tea time and then? Starve? The waiters and waitresses were scary, enforcers of an alien etiquette. My mum would apologize before asking a question about the menu, preempting her own ignorance, her I know I shouldn't be here-ness. Dad would go quiet, shuffle, point to the thing that sounded as though it most closely resembled the things that we had at home. He couldn't see what all the fuss was about. It got on his nerves. All these sauces and the funny, squiggly writing that you couldn't quite make out. Food could be about pleasure for them, but it was about solitary or stolen time. 10 minutes with a brew and a biscuit, a trip to the chip shop, or something you got from Aki Market just because you fancied it. It was about the satisfaction of a full belly. Northern working-class diets were about fuel, cost efficiency, and the sense of daily indulgence. So food was good, in a non-fetishized, utilitarian kind of way. But what was really good, what was essential in fact to the lives of Jack and Kathleen, was the smoking of cigarettes. To say that my parents smoked doesn't come close to describing the centrality of nicotine to the rhythm and meaning of their days. Time was measured in cigarettes, or rather, time was measured in the things that had to get done in between cigarettes, as though a day's activities were like words that had no meaning unless punctuated by the structuring grammar of a cigarette. Cigarettes were the reason for drinking hot drinks. They were what you looked forward to at mealtimes. They were the afters that followed afters. Cigarettes were necessary to watch television, to play snooker, to go to the pictures, to play bingo, to go out for a pint, to have a quiet night in. Cigarettes were necessary to talk to each other. They smoked the same brand, Embassy during the 70s, Benson and Hedges in the 80s. I think the switch was something to do with loyalty coupons as much as taste. Certainly, our house was partly furnished with items bought by fag coupons, an alarm clock, toasters, a portable radio, kettles, a set of kitchen knives. Maybe they felt they couldn't afford to stop smoking. They smoked in tandem, synchronized smoking, a harmony of in and exhalation. In the evenings, in front of the TV, the adverts would allow for a trip to the kitchen and a shout of tea or coffee, drinks would be brought through. Smoking could commence. One drink meant 3 cigarettes. One whilst it cooled, one to accompany it, one to signal its completion. 3 fags to 1 brew, 4 brews a night. And so the nights wore on, mouths dry and then wet, cups replenished, ashtrays overflowing. Need I say that their mouths were ruined? My old photos show Kath smiling in a way that tries to hide the browned and buckled teeth. Her lips are pursed, overstretched, a gesture that foregrounds her shame. She had been pretty as a girl and handsome as a woman, yet her confidence was undermined by her self-conscious mouth. Both of their sets of teeth had decayed by their 40s, gone by their 50s, replaced by full sets of dentures. My dad used his false teeth like a percussion instrument, expressing annoyance, approval, whatever, by clacking them together and swirling his jaw. If George Burns had his cigars, Groucho Marx his moustache, my dad had his dentures. They were the cymbal clash for his punchlines, the maracas of his routines. I can hear him now. Look at that stupid bastard! Usually Prince Philip, though other members of the royal family would do. I've seen, clack clack, better hair on a side of bacon. All that money and he still, clack clack, can't afford a smile. Clack clack, a face like a smacked arse. Clack clack. And on he'd go, a running commentary on the state of the nation and the various bastards and bloody idiots who ran it. I would love to say that John, Jack as everyone called him, was left-wing or a hardcore union man, but the truth is that he was a conservative. A conservative who voted Labour all his life, but a conservative nonetheless. He too had been an only child, a condition that I somehow associate with Toryism, with the privileging of the individual over what I imagine to be the collectivity of larger families. More important, he was an only child who was even more only from the ages of 8 to 14. Whether my grandfather volunteered or was conscripted to fight in the Second World War, I do not know, but I know that my dad relished his duty as his mother's guardian whilst he was away. Away seems an inadequate word for risking your life fighting Nazism for 6 years, but it was the word my dad grew up with. Your dad's away. And once he came back, it seemed he didn't want to talk about what he'd done or where he'd been. Thus did my grandfather return a stranger, to a boy who was a stranger to him. And Jack? Was Jack
Sample complete. Ready to continue?